Lesson 1.2, what's your social media of choice? We know that students interact using a variety of social media apps, but which one is your most used favorite? So typically what we would do is we would make a list of social media apps that you might use. We've got Twitter, which is now known as X, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and a bunch of others. So if I was with you right now, we would make a list of all the popular apps that you may use. Then we're going to do some predictions, as always, like we've done in the past. Which one do you think would be the favorites of the class? And what percent would you think would choose that app? Based on past usage, I would think that Snapchat would be a top pick and probably come in at around, we'll say 55% of the favorites. Well, the only way that we could tell what this would be is to collect the data. I'm going to default to some data that I collected previously since I'm not with you today, and we'll use that to do the analysis. We're also going to show you how to use some applets, which will become one of your favorite things to use with doing the analysis of your data. So we talked about representing our data a few ways. Our previous couple lessons, we've been focusing on the dot plots as well as doing frequency and relative frequency tables. So let's get our table idea set up here for step 3. And when we're doing that, remember with your frequency and relative frequency tables, it looks something like this. You always put the heading of what you're measuring. And here we're measuring the social media types, so that's why I have social media. We want the frequency, and we also want the relative frequency. So based on my polling in my previous set of data, there were 3 as standouts. We had Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. When I did my polling, the frequencies for these 3 apps were 18, 14, and 3. And so if we add those together, we should have a total of 35 individuals that were asked. The total is important because that's going to help us with the relative frequency. And again, relative frequencies we typically express as a decimal, usually 3 decimal places. And then remember, if you have anything that's repeated, you put a bar over the top. So let's pause here and have you calculate the relative frequencies for these 3 apps. So again, to find the relative frequency, it's the frequency divided by the total. So for our Snapchat users, that is 0.514. Our Instagram users, 0.4. And TikTok, 0.086. Now that we have the frequencies and relative frequencies, we're going to make 2 graphical representations that I know you've done in the past, that we have not yet done together. So we're going to do a quick review here by taking this data and constructing a bar chart and a pie graph for your steps 5 and 6. So we're going to use some technology to assist us because I'm confident that you could do these by hand, but we want to make sure that we can do quick representation so we can really dive into what is it telling us. That's really our focus in the statistics class. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the applets, and I have the link posted on your Google Classroom page. You also can use the URL at the top to help you. And so when you go to the applet, the main page looks like this, okay? It will come up with your data analysis, probability, concepts, and so on. We're really going to focus on the data analysis section, and we're going to pick the 1 categorical variable. And so we always want to know the variable name, and so we were measuring the types of social media. So we're going to put that there. Then we are going to enter, well, what were the types that were measured? Well, our first one we had was Snapchat, and the frequency was 18. Then we had Instagram, which was 14. And I need to add a third category, so I'm going to go to the plus here and put TikTok. And we had 3 users. If I had more categories, I would just keep hitting the plus to add those in. But here are our 3 categories. Here are our 3 frequencies. We're going to begin the analysis. So you're going to select that. And if you scroll down, notice you've got your bar graph distribution. And we're doing it by frequency. So we want to sketch this into our step 5 on our papers. Again, you always have the title as to what you're measuring, and the categories are also labeled. These are on your x-axis, your inputs for the experiment that we did. I shouldn't say experiment, the survey that we did. Now, since we're doing frequencies, your y's, your outputs, are going to be scaled to show how many of each category did we have. So you should always start with a 0, and then you're going to decide the scale you want to use to count by for that frequency. So here, 2s would be fine, and so I have that labeled, and so I know when I look at the heights of the bars, I'll know exactly how much of each category that I have. So again, you're going to copy this onto your step 5 in your lab. So it looks like this. You want to make sure your graphical representations are accurate, everything is fully labeled, because that's how you're communicating the evidence you have to support your conclusion. Now, the second representation is the pie graph. So if you go back to your applet, we already have the data entered in above here, right? There's your category and frequency. What we're going to do is go to the graph distribution and change it to a pie chart. Now remember, your pie chart is a circle, okay? And so we're talking about the percentage of the circle, the part of the whole for each of your 3 categories, and see how they're color-coded. So it's important to know the color of each category. So if you are doing a pie chart, you have to have a key to represent what that is. So normally what we would do is we would figure out the percentage of the 360 degrees each section would be covered. The applet is doing that for you. You also have your summary statistics at the bottom that tells you the percentages, the relative frequencies that are represented. So Snapchat here in the dark blue, that's your 51.4%. Instagram here in the light blue, 40%. And then TikTok, 8.6%. Remember, all of these should represent 100%. So you are going to sketch your pie graph with your key and put that on your notes. So let me do that. So these are different ways of representing what's happening with your variables for your survey. We know the frequencies, we also know the relative frequencies, and you have a visual of each type. So for part 7, and you may be asking yourself as well, what is the difference between the bar chart and the pie graph, because they are using the same information? Well, it's important to remember the bar graph, or the bar chart, might be referred to either one, is talking about the straight frequency that it occurs. The pie graph is showing you the relative frequency, the percentage of time it occurs. So that's the main difference. Pie graphs, percentages; bar charts, frequencies typically. So let's pull all the important ideas together. Again, with today's data, we're looking at displaying the different categories that we had. And remember, we said variables can be categorical or they also could be quantitative. So we were talking about categories today. And the two ways that we can arrange them are your bar charts and your pie charts. Bar charts or bar graphs, remember you're drawing and labeling your axis to show what they mean. You should always have a scale for the frequency axis, the y-axis that's starting at 0, and you're going to decide what you want to count by for your tick marks to be consistent in showing your data. Each category has its own bar, and the bar shows the frequency that category occurs. So again, you always have a title. Each bar is the category that you're measuring, and this will tell you the frequency that it's happening. When you're looking at your pie graphs, remember each area that's color-coded or shaded uniquely is showing the relative frequency, the percentage of the time it happens. All of those percentages should have a total of 100. Now, if you're rounding the percentages, it might be a little bit under or over, but again, technically it should be 100%. And you're always labeling what each pie piece represents with a scale, color-coded scale, something so we can see what's going on. It's a quick reference, because that's not like the bar graph where we have the reference right underneath with the names of the categories. Here they're just shaded for the color representation. The other thing, remember with the bar graph, I forgot to mention, is that your sum should be the total number of individuals asked. Okay, that's like your 100. So for us, we asked 35 individuals. By adding each of the frequencies, it should be 35. So that is our lesson on measuring categorical data and representing it graphically with your bar charts and your pie charts. What you are going to do next is try your application 1.2. Which cell phone speaks to you? So if you read through this, it says the Pew Research Center asked a random sample of 517 18 to 34-year-olds what types of phone they use, and that is the results they got. Now, anytime that you're giving a situation, right, like we've done the previous days, you want to pause and say, well, who are the individuals? What are the variables? And what types are they? So let's pause now and kind of the upper right-hand corner of your paper, why don't you write who you think the individuals are, the variables, and the types, and we'll check and make sure we're on target. The individuals should be the 517 18 to 34-year-olds in the survey. The variables are the types of cell phones that they have. So iPhone, Android, other. What will we consider these variables? Are they quantitative or categorical? These are categorical because it's not something we would take the responses and do averages of. That's when they are quantitative. These are just looking to see what the results are. So these would be categorical. With that in mind, you're going to take a look at your data. You've got a representation. You're going to see what's misleading about the bar graph. And then you're going to make a relative frequency bar chart for the table to display the distribution of types of phones for those 517 18 to 34s that were asked in the sample. Once you have your frequencies, you're going to go to number 3 and use them to sketch a pie graph for the data. You are welcome to use the applet to help you make these representations. Just make sure everything is clearly labeled and you have all of the frequency tables to back up the construction.